Can you hear me, Trudy? Trudy, can you hear me?
Am I taking the mute off? Can you hear me now? I was muted when we first started.
I can hear you now.
And the meeting is streaming now.
Okay, I'm calling back to order this regular meeting of council. Again, just respectfully acknowledging that this meeting is taking place on a traditional territory of the Seminolas First Nation. Just waiting for, it looks like, Councillor Savage to rejoin. While he's rejoining, I just want to make sure I'm perfectly clear that we had reshuffled the agenda. So maybe Director Coates, you can just restate the reordering of our meeting agenda items, please.
Is my mute off? Yes. Yes. So just for information of the public, council, when they approved the regular agenda, it was as amended to suspend the order of the agenda to move items 9D, 9E, 9F, 10E, and 11B up to immediately following item 9A.
Great, thank you. And perhaps if someone is able, or Director Coates, to call Councillor Savage. I don't know if he's having technical difficulties or not.
Hello? I've called a couple of different numbers, but there's been no answer. We resent the invitation. There isn't too much else we can do at this point.
Okay. I don't have my printed copy of the procedure bylaw. I forget what our timelines are for contacting member of council. I don't know if you have a director codes. Usually I have a printed copy with me, but I don't have one this evening. So I'll look it up.
Hi. So in the procedure bylaw, it talks about electronic attendance at meetings. I can read the section for you.
Sure.
It says during a meeting where a member is in attendance by electronic or other communication facilities, if there is a technical failure resulting in the member being disconnected from the meeting, there will be only 2 efforts made to reconnect to the member. If reconnection to the member is not achieved, the member will be deemed to have left the meeting, and the corporate officer will record this in the minutes. The unique thing is that currently we're operating under the emergency order, but we do try to follow the spirit of the procedure bylaw. Of course, this is all going to change. Starting on the 29th of September, we'll be back to the procedure bylaw.
Well, I'll see if I can try and call.
And so now when I try those 2 phone numbers, they both show as user busy.
Sorry, I had a got through, but it just went to his voicemail. So
So you were probably the user busy part.
And you resent the email just with the link for this Zoom meeting invite?
Yes, that is correct.
Councilor Gusbrook, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I move that we continue on with the meeting, and hopefully Councillor Savage will be able to join us shortly.
All right. Let's wait for Councilor Proctor to come back on. Okay. All right, so we're on to item 9A. So this is bylaw number 200. So we're just basically at adoption that the district. So is someone prepared to make this motion to the council? So Councilor Wilson, go ahead.
That District of Lantzville Good Neighbor bylaw number 200, 2021 be adopted.
And we have a seconder for that. Second by Councilor Gusselbrick. We're at adoption. So there's no debate. Just call the question. All those in favor? And Mayor Swain's opposed. It's carried. So that takes us.
You skipped item 8, in all respect, Mayor,
Oh, geez.
and item 7.
Why am I jumping at? I've got a hash mark on my agenda. So yes,
I was trying to get your attention before.
my apologies. So back to start of the consent agenda. So we're on to back to 7. So in our consent agenda, I'll just make the motion then that the recommendation for listed 7A in the consent agenda be approved. So this September, so it just lists the September 8th regular council meeting minutes. So do you have a seconder to that? Second by Councilor Gusselbrock. Call the question on that. So all those in favor, this is 7A. I gotta follow my agenda here. And that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to item 8, which is public input. Do we have any speakers registered for public input this evening? Through to Director Coates. We can't hear you, Director Coates.
Sorry, we're just
No
trying
worries.
to double check. We have Evan Peterson registered to respond to, he's the applicant, to respond to questions. And somebody has just registered, but it might be for the items that are the subject of the public hearing, so they're not eligible. We could open it because we don't get the email that we usually get when someone comes in late. So we could open it and see if that's the purpose. And if it is, then you would need to advise them that there's no public input until the public hearing stage.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so he is. So we won't even open that one. So Evan, there's Evan Peterson. Oh, and there's Councillor Savage. Great.
Yeah, so I understand. So for item 9B and C, there's no public input available or can be given on that because that is subject to future public hearing. And then for sorry.
And so Evan Peterson is the applicant for
Yeah.
9BC. He's just available if there's questions.
So wouldn't it be more appropriate just to respond to that during 9B? If-
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so if he's able to stay in on the call until we get to 9B and C of our agenda for first reading, is that okay through to council? Any objections? Okay. All right, so that takes us on to now moving ahead of our agenda, so to 9D. So make sure I'm correct here. So this is bylaw number 286. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
That District of Lantzville 2022 property tax exemption bylaw number 286, 2021 be given first, second, and third reading.
And do we have a seconder to that? Okay, seconded by Councillor Gusselbrook. Any discussion on that item? Okay, hearing none, I will move to calling question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. All right, so it takes us on to 9E. So is someone prepared to make that motion? This is regarding a development permit application for 7908 Lantzville Road. So Councillor Proctor.
That development permit number DP 21-30 be issued to property owner for 7908 Lantzville Road.
Okay, and do we have a seconder to that? Second by Councillor Gusselbrock. Again, we're at for this item. Is there any debate on this item? Okay, Councillor Savage.
Yes, and thank you. As a point of privilege, I apologize for being absent there. I was being sick in the bathroom, so I'll do my best tonight. And if it's all right, if I disappear off the screen for momentarily, that's why. So with this particular one, this is to reduce the setback from Norriston Creek, 15 meters to 11 for a house and 15 meters to 0 for a vehicle bridge. I'm in favor of keeping Norriston Creek as natural as possible, especially right near the ocean where the fish come up. If we keep going with the minimum possible setbacks instead of a healthy 15 meters, which the zoning bylaw calls for, then we're impacting Norriston Creek every time we do it. So I perfectly understand the owner wants a bigger footprint for a house, but maybe the footprint of the house should give way instead to the creek setback. That's 13 and a bit feet less for the house. There must be a house designed ways to work around this. So there's currently a footbridge. This is proposed to be replaced with a vehicle bridge. This is so the house can be adjacent to the waterfront instead of on the inland side of the creek. This is perfectly understandable. An owner would want the oceanfront location with a vehicle bridge for access, but how many more properties are going to be asking for variances which affect Norriston Creek? And are we going to grant every one? Or when does the creek come first and the owners simply have to accommodate that fact? I find a 15-meter setback on Lantzville's major fish-bearing creek to be reasonable. It's what the zoning bylaw calls for. However, my compromise would be to grant the vehicle bridge, but with all due apologies to the property owner, to deny the setback variance for the house. So that's where I would come down on it. Thank you.
Okay, additional discussion on this item. So through to Councillor Savage, are you prepared to make an amendment, or what are you prepared to do, or are we just simply going to vote?
Yes, I could make an amendment to, and that amendment would simply be to replace that section of the wording in the motion to change the 11-meter to 15-meter for the house variance.
Okay, so through to you, Councillor Savage, on page 117 of your agenda, this is just some suggested wording. If you want to amend the development permit, so just to have that the development permit number DP, it's the wording's right there in your agenda, page 117.
Yeah, and we've moved this ahead. So which number are we on now, please?
So we're on
Oh,
page.
here it is, yeah. So I would say that I would change the motion to that development permit number DP 2130 be issued to the property owner for 7908 Lantzville Road with the amendment, the 11-meter variance for the house be returned to 15-meter setback for the house.
Yeah, I'll second that. Discussion on the amendment. Is there anything further to add, Councillor Savage?
Sorry, I just need to clarify. I understood the motion was on the floor to issue the development permit. And now there's a motion to amend it. So
Yes.
the form of the motion would be that the motion on the floor be amended as by adding, and then in quotes, what you're going to add. And so you're adding, quote, as amended, and I don't know, I may need to seek for advice from Director Young on the actual wording in the DP.
Yeah, through the mayor to council. So as amended by deleting item 3A in the development permit, and that would delete the setback variance for the creek.
So item 3A is on page 125 of the agenda. And
Yes.
it says by reducing the minimum stream side setback. So that would take that clause out of the development permit.
Okay. All right, so through to Councillor Savage, is that your intent is to delete 3A?
Yes, please. Thank you for that.
And as a seconder, I'm fine with that. Further discussion on this? Okay. And for myself, I'm okay. Go through to you, Councillor Gusselbrock.
Yes, I don't support the amendment. I think the original motion, and I'm looking at page 126, has quite an extensive section on stream side protection. First of all, the development must be carried out in accordance with their riparian area assessment report. That will be done by a qualified environmental professional. All work has to be supervised. So I'm confident that the work will not endanger Narston Creek. And in fact, it sounds like the current footbridge is dilapidated. It's probably been there a long time, probably poses more of a risk to the stream than building a new one under the supervision of a qualified environmental professional. So I won't support the amendment.
Any additional discussion? So Councillor Proctor.
I just wanted to add that I think it's important that we consider every application for development permit on its own merits, and that by approving an application on its own merits, I don't believe is setting a precedent. And so I have read this staff report. I won't be supporting this amendment. And I think that the applicant has done their due diligence and will be taking care of the riparian area in a proper way.
Any additional speakers on this item? Okay, hearing none, I will move to calling the question. So we're just calling the question on the amendment. I think that's correct. So all those, so Director Coates, is that how you understand it? We're just calling.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The motion that's on the floor is that the motion on the floor be amended by adding, quote, as amended, and by deleting, quote, 3A, and it has the wording for 3A.
Okay, thank you. All right, so all those in favor? Opposed? Noting Mayor Swain's opposed, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Gusselbreck, and Councillor Proctor opposed. The motion, or the amendment, sorry, fails. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Noting that Councillor Savage is opposed, the motion carries. So it takes us on to 9F. So this is the Clark Crescent Water Main Replacement Budget Amendment. Someone prepared to make this motion? Okay, Councillor Proctor, go ahead.
That the 2021-2025 financial plan bylaw be amended to reflect additional funding of $150,000 for the Clark Crescent Water Main Replacement Project with funding from uncommitted COVID-19 Restart Grant funds.
And do we have a seconder to that item? Seconded by Councillor Gusselbreck. Discussion, so through to you, Councillor Proctor, and then Councillor Gusselbreck.
I don't have anything right now.
Okay, Councillor Gusselbreck. Okay, and through to the rest of the council. Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand the increase here is somewhat due to the pipe being so expensive now. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't be waiting until it's quite an anomaly in pricing, just this current thing we're going through. If it wouldn't be wiser to wait till these pipe costs come back. So question through to staff, if there's someone that could tell me just how timely this is, or would it be a problem if it waited so that we could have a much reduced price on it?
Sorry. Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Savage. Basically, I've called several contracting companies and several suppliers, and they are of the opinion that this is going to last for at least a minimum of a year, year and a half. And then they don't expect the price to go down, to just level out.
Gotcha. All right. So it's not really going to be a savings by waiting. And this is next on the list, so it's timely and that we want to keep it methodical and keep replacing things. Is that the idea?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional comments on this item or debate? Okay, hearing none, I will move to calling the question then. So all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. That takes us on to jumping ahead in our agenda. So this takes us now to 10E. So we have the 2022 council meeting schedule. Someone prepared to make that motion? Go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
That the 2022 council meeting schedule be approved as attached to the September 8th, 2021 staff report. And further, that staff be authorized to publish notice of availability of the schedule.
Okay, and do we have a seconder to that item? Second by Councillor Gusselbrock. Any discussion on council schedule essentially? Okay, hearing none, moving to call into questions. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so then that takes us on to the next item, which is 11B. So we have the Community Safety Standing Committee, September 7th, 2021, meeting recommendations. So we have two recommendations. We'll take them separately. So someone prepared to make the first motion. So go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
That the Community Safety Standing Committee recommendations to council that residents of Lantzville be invited through our community newsletter to provide feedback on the potential of reducing the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour on Dickinson Road, and that this input be presented to the committee at the next Community Safety Standing Committee meeting for the committee's consideration of the proposal for recommendation to council.
And seconder for that. Okay, second by Councillor Gusselbrock. Any discussion on this item?
Sorry, just for clarity, we'll strike out that the committee recommends to council. That's usually not in that's a typo that it was in the agenda. It just starts
Okay.
at that residence. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, and discussion, so through to Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Gusselbrock. So go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
We discussed this at length at our safety committee meeting, and just for the sake of efficiency, I'm not going to repeat everything I had to say there. I think it's a good idea to open this up to feedback to from the whole community, and I look forward to discussing it again after we get that feedback.
Okay, and through to Councillor Gusselbrock as a seconder. Any additional discussion from council on this item? Okay, hearing none, I will move to call in the question. All those in favor and opposed, it's carried unanimously. It takes us on to the second part. Someone prepared to make the second half of item 11B, make the motion. Okay, I'll make the motion then that council members receiving community safety complaints from the public be advised to respond, and in parentheses, or sorry, quotation, please call the RCMP direct at 250-754-2345 regarding speeding or criminal issues, or email the district at district@lantzville.ca regarding other community safety issues, providing name, civic address, and concern. If your concern could not be resolved with the chief administrative officer, you can email the district@lantzville.ca, addressed to the attention of council, and staff will distribute to all members of council. Do we have a seconder to that item? Second by Councillor Proctor. Discussion. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I think it just gives consistency to how all members of council basically interact with the public with respect to anything concerning the district, especially in a community safety way. And then that way, that information, if need be, can always funnel back to where it needs to go, including the safety committee itself, or the Community Safety Standing Committee. So Councillor Proctor, as a seconder, do you have anything to add?
I do. I think that it's important that we educate the public in how they can participate in the democratic process. And what's outlined here is the correct way to participate and to provide feedback to council and staff. So I look forward to this being advertised through the community. So I've seen cases where people speak to certain issues that are very important to them, and they feel that they're being heard, and unfortunately they're not. So the correct way to get staff and council's attention is to follow the protocol outlined in this. And again, for efficiency, I'm not going to repeat all of my comments that I made at the safety committee meeting. It was a fulsome discussion.
Okay, additional comments from council. Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add for a resident's sake that it's so important to get any of these safety concerns on the record. Otherwise, the only things that count with the RCMP are actual reports. So the more the reports they get, the more likely they are to act, and the better, input they have, then the more likely it's going to happen. So thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so unless there's any further comments from council, I'm likely going to call the question. Okay, seeing none, I'll move to call in question. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay. All right. I guess we should have just done 11A at the same time, but all right. We'll jump back in our agenda. Now we're moving back to 9B. So we have bylaw number 283. And what I've proposed to council is as we do first and second reading separately. You can hear me out on this, and then we can decide as a body what to do. So my thoughts are to do essentially first reading, just introduce the bylaw. This would also provide the proponent or the representative to Mr. Peterson to give us or answer any questions of council. And if council so chooses to move ahead with second reading, then it would give us a chance to debate, amend, and move forward that way. So if we were to just go with first reading, then we'd have to be very careful not to enter into debate or provide comment about the application. Is simply to provide an opportunity to have a question and answer period about the various aspects of the proposed bylaw amendment. So it's it's the will of council, really. So Councillor Proctor.
I would prefer to do both readings at the same time for the sake of efficiency.
Okay. I think that's the only way it's going to work is if we do it by unanimously. So I will ask then that someone do first and second reading or make the motion. Sorry, Councillor Savage, you did have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely, it has to be first reading first. I have so many questions. I'm somewhat in the dark with so much of this proposal. We need the information first for first reading. And as well, we need an information meeting before it even goes to second reading, because we have to know what we're voting about. I don't at this point. And so how should we go about this is the question, Mayor Swain, before I finish off. Is that a motion to go with first reading first?
Well, it's really the will of council how we proceed ahead. So if the will of council is to do first and second reading together, then so be it.
Right, so I will make that motion then, and I will read it out now. That District of Lantzville Official Community Plan Bylaw number 150, 2019, Amendment Village South Special Area Plan Bylaw number 283, 2021, be given first reading. And further, that District of Lantzville Official Community Plan Bylaw number 150, 2009, Amendment Village South Special Area Plan Bylaw number 283, 2021 is consistent with the District of Lantzville Financial Plan and the relevant waste management plans.
Okay, so do we have a seconder to that? So I'll second it. And again, this is seconding first reading. So it's through to council then. And again, it is limiting there's no debate at this point. This is for staff and for the representative of Lantzville projects to essentially provide any information or introduce the bylaw amendments. So through to staff, so Director Coates, I see your hands up.
Yes, I just want to clarify. You know, it's in our procedure bylaw, and but I know we don't get many development applications, but we have mentioned this in the past, that first reading, there is no discussion, no debate. What you're doing is you're simply saying, hi, I'm a bylaw. And then it's at second reading that you start that. So there is no opportunity for discussion. There is no opportunity for having anyone else answer questions. It's simply an introduction of the bylaw. And that's in your procedure bylaw, it's standard process in municipalities with development.
So for simplicity's sakes, what I'll do is I'll just make the amendment motion to after first, add, and second. So if I have a seconder to that, so seconded by Councillor Gusselbrecht. So essentially amending the motion on the floor so it is given first and second reading. So basically, you know, honoring what's in our procedure bylaw. So basically now we're at the point where it's on the floor as first and second reading. So now it is up for both debate, questions, whatever you want to do as a body. Councillor Gusselbrecht, you have
Sorry, I just want to confirm that you had a vote on the amendment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess we should vote on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that what you're questioning, Councillor
As a point of information, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, I'm puzzled here. I made a motion to just pass first reading.
Yeah.
Or to just vote on first reading. And now it seems you feel the procedure bylaw won't allow that, but I think it does. I think what Director Coates, all she was saying is we couldn't debate the matter if it's just first. If we choose to pass first reading, then there's no debate on it. We just either pass it or we reject the first reading. That's what she meant. I don't think there's anything in the procedure bylaw that prevents us going from just having first reading. That was my understanding, was you thought procedurally we couldn't do first reading, but I was just making that motion, which is perfectly allowed in the procedure bylaw to just go to first reading tonight.
Yeah, I hear your concern, Councillor Savage, but I think it's we don't get a lot of development OZB amendments and zoning amendments coming forth, and I believe the interpretation that Director Coates has given us is true, and so it's really a moot point, really, with respect to just doing first reading. If we do first reading, there's no questions that we're going to be able to ask staff. It's essentially we're just accepting the amendment as presented, and that's it. And there's no debate on that. So that's why I moved ahead with amending it to include second reading, so then we can open it up for discussion, debate, questions, and so forth. Okay, so Councillor Gusselbrecht, do you have a question?
Yeah, point of information. Did I hear Director Coates say that this is not the time to debate the application, but it's a time simply to ask questions and to receive information from the proponent? Is that correct?
Sorry, no, that's not what I said. What I said is that a bylaw, when it's before council, at first reading, it cannot be debated. It will be introduced by title only and will not be debated. I'm reading right out of the procedure bylaw. So why I spoke in the first place was because there was there was a motion on the floor to give it first reading and to also give the sort of ruling that it's consistent with the financial plan and the relevant waste management. Usually that motion would happen after second reading. But then in the introduction, there was, and so when we vote on this, then we can, that you can have debate and you can hear from people and, the applicant or members of council. I just wanted to make it clear that first reading is just introducing the bylaw. It's just saying, hi, I'm a bylaw. And then you have to go to second reading to get to the stage where you're going to have any discussion. And there's, it's up to council, like at second reading, if there's something that you want to have happen, then you can make a motion about that. That's more to do with the Director Young's area, and I can defer to him on comment on that. But right now, your motion on the floor is to amend the motion that was put on the floor to give the bylaw first reading, and further that is consistent with. So there's a motion to amend to add in the words and second reading. So that's what you're voting on right now, is whether to amend or not.
Okay. So Councillor Gusbrack.
Yeah, I'd like to call the question on that amendment.
Sure. So I will call the question on it just so we can move forward with this. So all those in favor and opposed? Okay, noting that Councillor Savage is opposed, the amendment carries. So now we're basically to the motion that's in our agenda package. So at this point, I don't see, is Mr. Peterson on the line? I don't see a box for him.
Yes, he is. Is there a question you want to pose?
Well, I don't know. I was just wondering because this would be the time for council. If there's any specific questions about the content within the proposed OCP amendment bylaw, this is the time to ask. So through to council, are there questions for Mr. Peterson?
I don't think the motion was carried yet.
Oh, sorry, we can't debate. Well, you called the question on amendment, so we have it moved and seconded now. We're at first, that we're debating first and second reading. So I don't know what I'm missing, Director Coates.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just making sure. So it's, I guess really at this point, this would be a good time to ask questions and then we can get into debate. And if there's, if council has motion or amendments to present to council, then that's when this is the time to do it. So through to council, is there any questions through to Mr. Peterson while he's on the line? So Councillor Savage.
Yes, I have many questions, and I think the community has been waiting for some answers. So I will begin with my questions, please. So the first one is, are you there, Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the first question, you were the consultant for the Clark Med development, where it was obvious residents were concerned about the total unit numbers. Yet
Point of order.
Concern the total.
So on Councillor Savage, sorry to interrupt you, but point of order is being called. What's your point of order, Councillor Gusbrack?
We're discussing first and second reading on the Village South motion, not the Clark Med motion. And Councillor Savage should confine his questions to the Village South.
Okay, so I understand your point of order, Councillor Gusberg. I'm just wondering how that line of questioning would tie into the Village South application. I don't know where Councillor Savage is going with that, but Councillor Savage, keep in mind, this is about the Village South development.
Yes, absolutely. But the tie-in is simply this, that with such concern for total unit numbers, my question is, why are the numbers from the Village South development not being publicized? That's the first question, please.
I don't understand the question.
Why aren't they being named in the documentation and the hundreds of pages of documentation? Why are we not being told what the total unit numbers are for the Village South development as we were for the Clark Med development?
Simply because we have different development typologies in this instance, in which some areas are going to be regulated by floor area ratio rather than units per hectare or a total unit count for a parcel. And so there is a range of potential total units. And also, as you know, as you're aware, in some cases you may have smaller units in a multifamily building. In some cases you may have larger units. We also have a mixed use designation, which could be fully commercial. It could be commercial with residential up above. And so the total unit count is unknown at this stage.
All right, but in areas A and B, can we have those unit numbers? Because the zoning bylaw gives units per hectare, 100 for area B and 25 units per hectare for area C. So
yep, if you did the math of the total area for area A and area B, you would have roughly 225 ground-oriented residential units for area A and approximately 290 multifamily units for area B.
all right, and that is the maximum allowed, in your opinion, from the proposed zoning bylaw?
It's not my opinion. It's the area of area A and B multiplied by the zoning regulation of units per hectare.
Okay, so in the other documents, we have the reason it's hard for us to compute area C is we were not given the lot sizes for area C. However, Newcastle Engineering, in their servicing report, they list these areas, and they also came up with a projection of 321 units for area C, with a total number of units for 848 for the development.
Yeah. So if that's, is that a question? I can shed some light on that.
Do you agree with those numbers from?
Well, those numbers need to be taken in context. So first of all, the total hectarage of each area, each zone is provided on page 18 of the special area plan that's in the application package. So those numbers are there. Secondly, it's worth noting for everybody listening and reviewing the materials, the Watt Consulting report and the Newcastle Engineering report both include a total unit count for the purposes of their report. So what I mean by that is that they need to find essentially a proxy amount of a use and a density that would be representative of the potential traffic or the potential servicing need to those properties. And the way that they did that is they calculated those as if those buildings would be fully residential, which will not be the case because that's not actually permitted by the zoning. However, it makes the most sense, it's best practice to do that in both those cases because the range of potential commercial uses can vary greatly in terms of their water demand. And so having residential as the sort of proxy or representative use when calculating traffic and when calculating the servicing demand, that's what's done. So that's why those numbers are there. They're inflated over what is actually permitted in the zoning.
Okay, so 915 were the total units given by Watt traffic report, and 848 were the total units given with the Newcastle Engineering service study. So what numbers are we to conclude? What would your numbers be that we're getting here? And are those close to what we're getting, 915 and 848?
I thought I made it reasonably clear that those will definitely be significantly higher than the numbers that are even reachable under the maximum of the zoning bylaw. So as an example, in area C, with the exception of the transition zone, which is noted in the zoning map with the hatch over top of it, the remainder, the majority of area C, requires that a commercial retail use is on the ground floor. So that's sort of point number one, which would detract at minimum sort of 1/4 to 1/3 of the floor area that's used in those reports given to residential. Those would be taken away. Additionally, in the situation, for example, on the area C south of Ware Road, that is envisioned, and we're working towards having a grocery store on that location. So that would go from quite a substantial area at 2.0 FAR, currently calculated as all residential in the reports for the sake of, best practice proxy for demand. That would be 0 residential units. So again, that would reduce those numbers by, I could do back a napkin calculation, but I'm going to say probably 100 or more. And same could happen on the seaside. If you had increasingly, there's decisions being made by developers and communities in village settings on the most, appropriate given the market, what type of building would go in there, so that we could have situations where the vast majority of that is commercial only or retail only. And so those residential unit numbers would drop all the way down to closer to the original numbers I gave you. So that's why there isn't a number listed. There's flexibility in those zones. They're mixed use zone. It's virtually the same as your existing village zoning. And that's why there's no total unit count given.
Okay, with the zoning bylaw, it would allow the grocery store to be on the bottom floor of a 4-story building, with the top 3 floors being residential. Is there anything in the zoning bylaw that would prevent that?
Point of information, please.
Hey, Councillor Proctor, what's your point of information?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think that these questions are very important, but Councillor Savage has had the floor for more than 9 minutes. Will we all have a chance to ask questions, or how will we be dividing that up?
Yeah, there'll be an opportunity for every member of council to have questions. I think in terms of this isn't really a debate we're in. This is a question and answer period, but sorry, I wasn't timing. So Councillor Savage, if we're going to let him have this last question, then we'll open the floor to other members of council. And
I had my hand up. Did you see that, Mayor?
No, I actually didn't.
Yeah, so I have my hand up to speak.
That's fine.
I do a speakers list. Yeah.
That's fine. I'll just finish this off. However, I really want to underline that it is extremely important we know what we're voting on. Me personally, I have never seen a proposal with so many questions unanswered. And it's extremely important. I don't care how long it takes, especially for residents and myself. We must know exactly what's entailed here before we vote on it. That's my point. So the last thing I'll ask them, I was just in the middle of that, is to Mr. Peterson, is there anything in the zoning bylaw that would prevent this grocery store being on the bottom floor of a 4-story building with the top 3 stories being residential per the maximum allowed for mixed use buildings?
I think these answers are actually all there, Councillor Savage. To be perfectly frank, it's in the zoning bylaw. Nothing would stop that from happening in a mixed use format. And all the other questions you've asked are also actually provided in the application, just to be clear.
So then in conclusion, there's nothing to guarantee it will be a standalone 1-story grocery store. It could just as easily be 4 stories. Thank you.
No, that's exactly what I just said. Yep.
Okay, so I believe Councillor Proctor, you're next. And then just in terms of speakers list, Councillor Gusselbrecht, Councillor Wilson, are you wishing to speak anytime soon or questions? No? Yes? Okay, so the floor is yours, Councillor Proctor.
Thank you. Thank you for your application. I thought that it was very clear and easy to understand and well outlined. And I have no intention of voting on anything that I don't understand. I do have just one simple question for you. Realistically, what do you foresee the number of units at build out on this project?
Well, I hesitate to answer that, not because I think it's a number that's going to, be astronomical or something like that, only because of what I already mentioned about markets and what ends up making the most sense. I hear Councillor Savage asking a question that implies that there's a concern that there'd be a 4-story building on the grocery store site. That very well is permitted by the zoning. However, if you take a look around at most grocery store sites, if that's what ends up going there, they're often not in a mixed use format because of economics. And so, I could see that that's the most likely scenario in that location in my mind presently. If I had to take a stab at the total number of units, I would say likely somewhere in the neighborhood of 700. The reason why it's so high in those reports is because that's not based on a design, that's based on, like I said, best practice, built-in safety factors to ensure that they're not under designing or under building any of the infrastructure. These engineers are put their stamps on these things. We're not going to do this predicting under the future demand.
I understand, and I think that that's great. Thank you for your answer. I have one more question. I think that construction takes a lot longer than most people visualize. I think that some people look at this and think that next Christmas, this is all going to be completed and we're going to have 700 units and a grocery store and a new playing field, and it's just going to, kind of gobsmack us because it's so much change at once. So I'm wondering if, in your estimation, how many years would it take to build out a project of this scope?
If I had a crystal ball, and then I could give you an answer, but it's going to take well more than a decade to build out a project of this scale, if not two, realistically. What tends to happen on projects of this size is that it comes in waves, in that there would be sort of a few buildings built within a couple of years, and then there might be a break depending on the market and depending on the uptake of units in a given area, and then there'd be another wave of another section and so forth down the line. It's not even in the realm of possibility that something like this could be built out in a few years' time.
Thank you. And we will be getting a phased development plan before this comes to public hearing, I believe. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. Director Young would be able to speak to that more accurately than me.
Thank you. That's the only questions that I have for you at this time. I may have some at a later date, but that's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, through to the rest of the council. Any questions, comments for Mr. Peterson? Okay, I've got a few myself. I'm looking at page 99 of our agenda, which would be, it's actually blurred out on your thing here. So it'd be page 51 of the actual plan under the benefits and amenities. And, one of the things I appreciate that's actually in there, it says under housing, it just says more attainable housing options throughout. So I appreciate that, to me, that's kind of an honest answer to put in there, because I think this whole notion of affordability is completely out the window, especially when we look at the context of Lantzville being such a highly desirable area to live in. You're always going to pay a lot more to live in Lantzville. But the one question I have is, in terms of the plan itself, and things evolve, even since our OCP was adopted, but this whole concept of non-market housing. Was non-market housing considered as part of this application, or having provisions within the actual plan or concept plan to include non-market housing, or portions of the development as non-market?
It was discussed in a general concept. One challenge with providing non-market housing is you typically need a development partner, housing authority, or BC Housing, or down here in Victoria would be, there's multiple. We don't have a partner in that realm, but we do have the ability to, as you said, the more attainable housing, providing plenty of opportunities for renters, smaller unit sizes, different formats. So yes, it was considered. It could only be taken so far. We didn't have a partner for that, and so we focused on creating workforce level housing, with this hitting sort of the so-called missing middle: townhouses, low-rise apartment buildings, opportunity for some single family and some smaller housing, smaller lot housing. So that's why we focus on the attainable housing.
Okay, yeah, fair response. I just look at not to get into a conversation or a debate with you about this, but I do look at Qualicum Beach, and they have a non-market housing that's was recently approved and will be eventually going in. And I just see it, Lantzville is, we want to try and be as an inclusive community as possible. And I think part of that inclusivity is that we have to have some form of market housing or a non-market housing, sorry, to force that issue. So I think there should be land or areas set aside for that, and it should be part of the plan. And, otherwise what we're going to run into is, it's just going to be a more expensive North Nanaimo, where we have a lot of apartments, and I'm looking at real estate nearby, and I look at there's across from Home Depot in Nanaimo, there's an entry level or ground floor, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment for $309,000. And when you factor in property tax and you factor in building maintenance price or so on, or fees, the average or median income earner or family income I don't think they can afford it. So affordability, I think, shouldn't go completely by the wayside. And, I think moving forward with any application, we need to have that discussion even as a council. Earlier in the term, I brought up BC Housing to talk to our council. And again, I just think it's, if we want to have an inclusive community, we want to have diversity, people across all socioeconomic backgrounds. So we have to have that. It's not it's a must, especially to have that representation of the school. And I see certain areas in our community kind of, it's getting gentrified for sure. So
I can offer a couple additional comments there.
Sure, yeah, all ears. Thank you.
One comment I'd make is that there's nothing stopping a affordable housing building being built on this property in the future through the current zoning. Particularly, the FAR-based multifamily residential zoning is ideal for a situation such as BC Housing coming in, working with a partner to build affordable housing on a property, if that timing and the location works out in the future. So that'd be sort of point number one. Additionally, we're focused on creating density to simply reduce some of the supply demand issue, which is cranking up prices in Lantzville and in North Nanaimo. So that's another point there. The final point I'd make is that we're making a contribution of what will likely be well in excess of $1.5 million to the district, which could be used for the acquisition of affordable units in the future or even on this site.
I appreciate the comments, and that kind of goes into the senior supportive housing. Again, looking at the non-market housing, the last thing I'd want to see built is nothing but Berwick style, senior supportive housing, because that's very expensive and isn't attainable for a lot of people unless you get, you're going to be paying the $5,000-6,000 a month to reside in those places. I would like to see at some point in the future that within close proximity to our village core, we do have this option of non-market housing for senior extended care or supportive housing. So again, like you've already touched on, Mr. Peterson, about district could offset that cost of land. I see some of the land that's being proposed to be transferred to the community. I don't see why we wouldn't be entertaining the idea of having some of that land transferred for the purpose of non-market senior housing. We only get one kick at developing this cohesive, inclusive core. And at this point, if we just kind of go as is and we don't have this non-market housing component to it, I don't think we're going to get there. But that's just my opinion. What else? So another concern I have is around the grocery store. In the proposal, at least for the OCP concept for the OCP amendment and the concept plan, the pictures I see in the plan show, basically at best a 2-story grocery store, similar to, a lot of the new quality food type grocery stores that are popping up. Personally, I quite like the design. You got the shopping down below, you got a meeting room, or you got like a little pub, dining area upstairs. They're quite nice. Great to have in the neighborhood. They have one down in Harewood now, and it's I drop the kids off for hockey. Sometimes the wife and I go there, and it's fantastic. So I don't see that as being a detriment to the village. My concern, again, it has to do around the building heights, and this kind of jumps into the zoning bylaw, where it's the 4-story piece comes into play. And in our original OCP, the 4-story was around was basically put in there for the senior supportive housing, and that was it. It wasn't in there for apartments or anything else. So what I'm trying to reconcile is if the concept is to have a grocery store in the area, why wouldn't we have a section within and this is kind of jumping into the zoning bylaw amendment piece, but why wouldn't we have a section in the C, like a C1, that's for specifically the grocery store and maybe some other retail, but doesn't have all those other uses listed in there? So I don't know if you're able to provide comment to why, it's open-ended to me. And again, sorry to jump into the zoning bylaw, but they're two very connected documents.
No problem. I can speak to that. So I believe the OCP calls for 4 stories at the very least off of Lantzville Road inside the village, or south of Lantzville Road, if I recall correctly. The reason that we haven't restricted the zoning greater on that site is that right now that is something that we're working towards getting a grocery store there. We have some very positive signs, but there's nothing. There's no contracts in place that we would design the zoning specifically for that use. If I was a betting man, I would suggest that there, likely that there would be one there, but instead of restricting the possible future use and forcing us to potentially come back in the future to open up for other potential retail or commercial uses, we went with the village zoning, which is consistent with your existing village zoning and consistent with what's across the street. This lot that we're talking about is at the intersection of, Ware Road and Lantzville Road at the entry into the village. And to me, from a planning point of view, it's an ideal spot for a mixed use format or a, commercial retail format. Additionally, if there's the opportunity to cluster uses together, such as a grocery store with some other retail or commercial uses on that site, then that puts more destinations, more shops, more services within easy walking distance of new residents and existing residents. So it doesn't make sense to me to restrict the types of uses or the number of uses that might cluster on that site at this time.
Yeah, like, again, I look at other zoning bylaws out there, and this is just through to council and I guess to yourself, Mr. Peterson, but some of these in other communities are quite specific to what the uses are in those areas. And for me, like, limiting the use to kind of grocery retail and not having it wide open to, residential, like the mixed use, to me, it forces the issue of, working harder to put that in, that this is the big carrot we're dangling before our community. Like, look, we're going to put a grocery store in here. So as a representative of this community, I want to make sure that a grocery store, in fact, does go in there, or we're making every possible attempt to force that into that space. If market conditions down the road in 5 years, 10 years don't permit that because some big box store comes to some other area in Lantzville and it makes absolutely no sense, or, Save On redevelops and they do a big massive store or something like that, it may not make sense. But I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we should be doing everything possible to actually fulfill what we're dangling before the community, which is this big carrot of this wonderful, grocery store. We're selling a concept here, even our council, we're selling this to our residents. So, I would like to see the zoning reflect what we're proposing in the concept plan. And the one thing I do know is it's, residents, and for the residents I talk to, and I've talked to a lot, with respect to this concept of 4-story, it's, I think people accepted it for the senior supportive housing, but that was it. In terms of everywhere in that area, in the lower part, in the site or the site C area or whatever, it would be like driving into an area, and the only visual I have is driving into Parksville, and Parksville is emerging into more of a city than anything. But when you come into Parksville now down Alberni Highway, you got the big quality foods on one side. Now you got these apartment blocks.
Point of information.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
I'm not sure. Have we entered debating this, or are we still asking questions?
It's questions, debate. It's whatever goes, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think that if we're debating, we need to follow the rules in our procedure guideline.
And
Well, that limits debate to 5 minutes for your first.
oh, sure. Yeah, I guess if my time's up, my time's up. That's fine.
If we're going to ask questions and then let Mr. Peterson go and debate it, I think that makes a lot of sense. But to kind of force him to answer our debate is.
I'll come around to my point. So, if we were, my question there really is like, in terms of village feel and so forth, I feel like the plan that we have before us takes us more into into a Parksville setting coming down Alberni Highway, as opposed to driving down Memorial Ave into Qualicum. So I don't know if you can speak to perhaps the buffering of how these apartments would potentially lay out, especially down in that transition going down into that area C. So I don't know if you have any comments or how that's going to look, or what the vision is and how that would mesh into our community semi-rural charm.
Well, I think that if you take a look at the visuals within the submission, you'll get a sense of how the design is intended to look and how the design guidelines and zoning bylaw feeds into that. Frankly, whether you're talking about a 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, or 4-story building, what really makes the feel and quality of a village or a town is the level of design. It's not necessarily the height of the building. And to just as quick comparison here, if you take a big box store, which is equivalent of a 2-story building, versus a 3 or 4-story well-designed village feel with wide sidewalks, no parking in the front, no surface parking, etc. That's a much better village environment and much more cohesive with the identity of Lantzville. So I think the quality of the development and the quality of the design needs to be talked about as much or more than just numbers in terms of height. So if you want a sense of what that might look like, you can look at the images in the plan. Additionally, you'll see that there's quite a lot of attention to design guidelines in this document that speak to things like the relationship to street, reducing the impacts of parking and access, having active frontages, having high quality streetscapes, etc. So that would be, if you were asking my opinion on the feel and how this is consistent with Lantzville. I think what Lantzville wants is a vibrant, walkable, small town village feel. And in order to do that, you're going to need to have people within walking distance and shops and services in the core of your village. And those shops and services need to be viable. So they need to have people that can use them that are nearby and aren't going to bypass them to go to Nanaimo. So this is, it's a multi-layered solution, or it's a multi-layered problem, depending on how you look at it. But I would advise council to focus on the quality of the design and the components that will impact the design as much as they're looking at just a number in terms of stories.
Okay, thank you. So recognizing my time's up, I will move it on to council for additional questions, comments. So Councillor Gusselbrecht, Councillor Wilson, we haven't heard from you two at this point before I move forward to other members of council. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, this might actually be more a question for Director Young. Intrigued by the mayor's comment with respect to non-market housing. Was that, I don't have the OCP right in front of me, but is that identified in that area, non-market housing in the OCP? I didn't think that it was.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Wilson, I'd have to look at the policies in more detail. I don't know that it was specifically identified, but what I can say is that it is a council strategic priority to facilitate subsidized seniors housing. So there is a council priority to do that. But I don't know that it was specifically identified in this special planning area.
Okay. No, I'll just let that resonate and then maybe potentially bring that back later. Thank you.
Okay, additional members of council, so Councillor Gusselbrecht. No, nothing at this time. And then through to council again, so we'll go for a second round. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Savage.
Yes, getting back to my questions, in the OCP and in Clark Med, we've established how to define the percentage of public space or public parks as, for example, the OCP for Village South has a target of 22%. And the way we've defined it in the past, that's 22% of the total land. And Clark Med proves that because its dedication to public land was indeed 30% of the total land. So now for Village South, that is claimed 22% of the land is dedicated public land, but in fact, it's 18.65%. And the reason it's claimed to be 22% is because the definition of total land was changed to net total land after subtracting roads. And this change in definition did not apply to the OCP nor Clark Med, and it was not stated at all that the definition had been changed. These details were mentioned in an offhand way, obscurely placed on page 18 of one document amongst hundreds of pages of documents. So my question is, why was this 22% presented as if it meant the same as Clark Med or the OCP, yet in fact it means something quite different. In fact, it's 18.65% of the total land. Can you explain, please?
Well, I don't agree with the premise of your question because there was no definition changed whatsoever, and it wasn't hidden. It's on the main page 18, zoning map, highlighted in bold print there. So, and then it says net site area. And if it was different for the Clark Med, then it was different for the Clark Med application. That wasn't done intentionally. And right now what we're coming forward with is 22% of the net site area.
Okay, well,
A point of information, please. I didn't want to interrupt your question. Councillor Savage has referred twice now to hundreds of pages of information. I was only provided 80, so I'm wondering if I'm missing some information about this application. I have between page 30 and 110 of my information package for this agenda referring to this project.
Yeah, so
Are there hundreds of pages that I'm missing?
if I may, Councillor Proctor, I will ask Councillor Savage. So through to Councillor Savage, in terms of your reference, and I've heard it several times as well, I don't know what you're referring to. Is it more information outside of this? And if you can.
when you go to the district website,
Yes.
it provides a number of documents from the Watt traffic study to the Newcastle servicing, to the biodiversity study, to the water servicing, which is a big report. So there are many there. There's hundreds of pages. So they're all available for council and the public. And we
All right, so through Councillor Savage, I think that answers Councillor Proctor's question about the reference to hundreds of pages. So you're referring to documents outside of what we have included in our agenda package this evening. Okay, so
So at any rate, you were the consultant, Mr. Peterson, for Clark Med. You used a different methodology for stating percentage of public space. So again, you're saying that it is there, but I found it very difficult to find. So are you prepared to change this now to saying it's 22% with an explanation of the net site area, or can you change that to 18.65% of the total land, which is make it consistent with the OCP? My point being, it doesn't meet the OCP target of 22% of the total land, does it?
I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but I'm reading the section of the OCP right now, and it says 30% total green space, open space, and public parks, and it says in brackets target 22% public parks. It makes no reference to this total site area. It's the total green space of those things combined. So the methodology didn't change, the way it was expressed changed, and that obviously bumps up the number relative to the Clark Med. If that's what you're trying to get me to say, I think it's obvious for everybody that that's the case, that it would be higher in a net calculation. It's not hidden, it's on the primary zoning map of the application. It's 22% of the net site area. And no, we're not going to change that because that's what's the calculation of the zoning map that you see in front of you.
Okay, I'm certainly.
okay.
I'm
So
just here for
Councillor
information.
Savage, just
Yeah.
hold on 2 seconds, please. Director Young, I notice your hand is up.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to confirm what Mr. Peterson was saying. The OCP does not indicate that the target is 22% of the overall site area. In staff's view, it's reasonable to consider that to be the target for the net site area minus public roads.
And I'm not here to debate anything. I'm just here to get information, but just to make the information clear, it's clear as a bell, the evidence was given during Clark Med, that it was stated clearly by staff management as well as the proponent of.
Point of order.
And what's your point of order, Councillor Gusselbrecht?
Once again, we have a lot to do tonight with the Village South application before us. I really object to Councillor Savage trying to cross-examine Mr. Peterson on some application that's already been passed and carried, and it's improper to bring up a previous motion by council. That motion has been passed. So I really object to him referring to that further tonight.
Okay, so I don't, Councillor Gusselbrecht, I don't believe he's challenging the outcome of that debate and of that application. It's just more the definitions. But Councillor Savage, I believe that it's being asked and answered, and
Thank you.
a couple explanations now by both Director Young and Mr. Peterson. So I think we should be moving on from that topic.
Okay, very good. So I'll leave that to my comment portion later. And there are generally three formats for the apartment buildings. One is the owner owns the whole building. All the units are rental apartments. Second is all the apartments are strata titled. And the third, so that there's individual owners in the building. And the third is that some of the strata apartments are rented to create a hybrid of owner occupied and rentals. Is there any information as to what ratio there might be? Are these rental apartments being talked about here, or owner occupied, or is there no indication they could be either?
At this time, we don't have any information of what that will be. I think those are decisions further down the line.
Okay, thank you. It appears that School Road is proposed to become a through road so that students would have to cross this road to get to the existing lower field. Is that correct?
Based on the current concept plan, that is correct. Once that road is built and goes through.
Yeah, thank you. And the follow-up, and the road that leads to the front door of the school is also proposed to be a through road. Is that correct?
Sorry, I don't understand which road you're referring to.
That's the other road. It's proposed to be a road that goes parallel to Lantzville Road, going behind the Slegg property.
If I may, I believe that's the lane.
You're referring to the concept plan on page 12 of the report?
That would show it there, probably, yes.
That's still to be determined by the district. We're showing that as a conceptual idea right now, as far as what we're just talking about with tonight's application. The road would terminate where it terminates on the Lantzville project site.
Okay, thank you. And the staff report states 2 roundabouts are required for Ware Road. So if these roundabouts are requirements, why is the development stating them as a benefit?
They're noted as benefits because they're benefits to the overall traffic flow and mobility in the area. They're not noted as amenities because they're required.
Right. So you're saying they're a benefit to this development.
Sorry, I missed that. Can you ask that again?
So when you refer to them as a benefit, they're within the development, so they're a benefit to this particular development as opposed to the community?
No, I would not say that. I would say there would be benefits to the community.
And could you explain in what sense are they a benefit?
Well, benefits are things that help not only mitigate the impact of development, but also serve the wider community. And so in this case, it would help calm traffic coming into the village at Ware and Lantzville Road. The one at the center point of Ware Road is, yes, would be more beneficial to future residents in this area, but also helps mitigate the impacts of traffic coming from this development.
Okay, and the Freedom of Information documents we had showed in January 2020 that you and the developer wanted 1,500 unit in that range of 1,500 units, but you replied to the planner, it appeared he thought the density was too high. So was this ultimate density, which you're saying you think will be around 700 units, was that determined by him?
Who's him?
By the planner or by staff management?
No.
How did it come about then? Because your original proposal in January 2020 was for 1,500 units. So how did
I'm trying to recall which plan that was and at what stage in this process that came up.
That was January 2020. Then in June 2020, it was reduced down to about 978 units thereabouts was your expectation. And now unknown. So I'm just wondering how it evolved in specific units into.
Okay, Councillor Savage, I'm going to interrupt you. I see Director Young has his hand up. He may give some insight into the numbers, but again, I don't want to detract too far off the path here about, how we got to certain numbers and so on. Director Young, do you have a response?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that line of questioning is totally inappropriate. It has nothing to do with this application. It's correspondence that we had with the applicant, but nothing to do with the application that's before council.
Okay, fair. fair comment.
Okay.
Councillor Savage, if you, let's steer off of that topic.
Okay, very good. And
It's
so
really
the
adding
next,
anything.
please, is page 35 of the staff report. States current resources are insufficient to provide the necessary maintenance and operation of all the additional infrastructure of a development of this magnitude. This means the district needs to increase resource capacity as the development proceeds. This means, of course, more staff, and just 3 more staff would be an increase of about 240,000 per year. And as well, the other financial figure to consider is this development will hasten Lantzville when they hit population 5,000.
Point of
When this
order.
happens,
I
there
have a
will be
point
a
of
big-
information, please.
Okay, hold on. Councillor Gesselbrecht called point of order first, and then we'll deal with the point of information. So Councillor Gesselbrecht, point of order.
At what point are we moving off asking questions of Mr. Peterson and entering into debate? What we're hearing now is Councillor Savage's oft-quoted debate about increased RCMP costs, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm objecting to this line of debate. Ask a question.
Okay, so Councillor Savage, Councillor Gesselbrecht, point of order is noted. If we can try and be more direct with the questions, I understand you're trying to build some context to the questions, but if we can try and tighten it up a bit. And then Councillor Proctor, you had a point of information.
I do have a point of information. I know that we're trying to accommodate, some important topics here, but Councillor Savage has had the floor for 15 minutes. I think
Yes.
most of it is used for debate, not to ask questions. And Director Coates has her hand up, and I would like to hear what she has to add.
Yeah, I noted that she has her hand up, so I'm eventually getting to Director Coates, but this is a council meeting, so I try to allow councillors to speak, and then if need be, we'll introduce the staff comments. But through to Director Coates, yes, I do recognize your hand is up. Is there information for council?
Yes, I just want to draw council's attention that this is a council meeting. It's not a committee of the whole meeting. It's not a public information meeting. Your procedure bylaw, it's council's procedure bylaw. But if you want to suspend the rules, then you may want to do that by motion. So right now, your procedure bylaw says that no member shall speak on any question for longer than 5 minutes, or may speak and reply for longer than 3 minutes, and for a maximum speaking time of 10 minutes. Now, when a question is the motion that's on the floor. You have one motion on the floor. It's one motion. So I just, for council.
I know, I understand, and I was, in preparing for this evening, contemplating on how council to best deal with this, because again, recognizing the magnitude of this evening's discussions and this development application and so forth. It's something, our procedure bylaw, I don't think lends very well to you. You can't debate this in 5 minutes with a 3-minute follow-up and a 2-minute follow-up after that. So 10 minutes of speaking time. I think our community deserves more than that. And, so I was going to suggest suspending the rules, and I didn't do that. So that's on me as the chair of this meeting. But I do think we should be asking questions and getting as much information as we can. As we know as a council, it's, when we do send questions into staff, sometimes those questions are answered, sometimes they're not. It just depends on how much time and research goes into them. In terms of transparency of process, I think this is the best way of doing it. We're asking and having questions answered in the public eye. It's nothing to hide here. So I think it's definitely lends well to having a very transparent process and on the types of questions and answers that we're going to receive about this application. So, again, it is council's meeting. It's council what we do. Someone who wants to move that question or call the question, then we have to deal with that. So as a council, but again, in terms of just process, it's not an easy process, and it's the most significant development application this council will see, or any council in Lantzville will see. So I see Councillor Gusbrecht, you have your hand up, and then Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, excuse me, it's a point of information, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was right in the middle of speaking, so I don't know.
Sorry, Councillor Savage. Yeah, sorry, just to interrupt you again. I think at this point, we're kind of at a point where I think maybe council, I'm sensing frustration of council. So it's really, what does council want to do as a body and moving this process forward?
Could I at least have the opportunity to respond then, please? Since
You will. So Councillor Gusbrecht and then Councillor Proctor. So
okay, well, sorry, as a point of order, please.
what's your point of order?
Okay, I haven't heard a ruling. I was interrupted by 3 separate people about speaking, and I haven't heard what I'm supposed to do. It's the ruling that my time is up. Generally, when we ask questions, there isn't a time limit.
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize this as our classic debate, but you know, I guess my ruling at this point is you have had the floor for, I don't know how much time, but it has been, I'm sure, in excess of 5 minutes. You know, I think at this point, I'd like to hear from other members of council on how we're moving this process forward. I do have some more questions myself, but eventually we will come back to you, Councillor Savage. But right now, Councillor Gusbrecht and then Councillor Proctor.
Yeah, I'm listening to our parliamentarian. We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Savage has had an excess of 1/2 hour ask questions, which is, I agree with Councillor Proctor. It's been a lot of debate. I'm not prepared to suspend the rules. So Councillor Savage has gone way over his 10 minutes. And I think it's a duty of the chair to ask if any other members of council have anything to say, including yourself. And if not, that we move to the question on this motion here this evening.
Okay, so Councillor Proctor.
I'm not willing to suspend the rules at this point. We've gone on for an hour asking questions of Evan, and we've gone past asking questions. We've started debating, and a lot of our concerns can be asked of staff. And I think I'd be willing to, entertain that we. I'm not willing to suspend the rules, and we should have discussed that at the beginning of this, because we've spent an hour doing this now, and I believe any procedure that we follow is transparent, including following our procedure bylaw. And I have an amendment to make when it's my turn to speak.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Well, at this point, what I'll do is open it to the floor. So Councillor Savage, I'll let Councillor Savage speak, because but in terms of just asking questions, Councillor Savage, before we go back to you, I will ask or call upon other members of council. So go ahead, Councillor Savage, if you have it.
Well, that's fine. I just want to say that, look, I go by evidence, I go by facts. Our entire term so far has been allowed that questions do not count in terms of our speaking time, whether that has been the trend that's been set. Now, I've been interrupted. I've gleaned some great information so far. Every question I've had has revealed new information, and this is what I want, is information. Now, I'm being very careful not to debate. If it's seen as any of my questioning involving debate, then I'll even be more careful. These are questions that like the school road being connected. Now we've confirmed that. These are important questions. And I feel that it's just because it's me that's being cut off. If anyone else on council wanted these questions, they'd be going on ad infinitum. So
let's stop it there, Councillor Savage. Yeah, I think let's stay on the track of questions and answers, and let's not make it about personalities or anything more than that. All right, so Councillor Gusbrecht, you pointed out we should be asking and taking turns. I believe I've done that. I don't know if you have anything to add at this time or any questions, and then we'll go to Councillor Proctor, who has spoken to this. Okay, So Councillor Proctor, if you have a,
I don't have any questions, so, but I have a motion to make.
okay.
Okay, so I think if we're going back to regular order of business, we're timing people 5 minutes to first talk, 3 minutes after that. Is that, I'm just wondering
Well,
if we're suspending the rules or if we're starting fresh, or I think I need to know what, if we're going to be transparent, I need to understand the process. And I understand that this is new and different, and I'm attempting to give you leeway and listen to what you have to say.
Right, so I believe if we're at a point now where we want to start moving to amendments or making motions and so forth, then we should be going and following our procedure bylaw, which is the speaking times. So I'm fine with that, and that's what we will do. It doesn't mean that we can't go back to asking questions if councillors have questions, but yeah, it's really the will of council what we want to do. And this, you know, and this is one of the problems, you know, about not having committee of the wholes is once you get into a council meeting, it doesn't, in my opinion, lend itself very well to having these kinds of discussions, but we'll try and make that as best we can of the situation. So go ahead, Councillor Proctor, if you have an amendment motion you'd like to make.
I would like to make the following motion by adding to the motion on the floor, and further that prior to a public hearing being scheduled, the developer be requested to pay the cost of the district retaining a qualified professional to prepare a financial analysis of the proposed development, including responding to the following questions. Number one, will the development pay for itself in terms of potential tax revenues weighed against the public cost to be incurred in providing local government services to the development? Number two, what benefit is the development to the community, including consideration of the appropriateness of any voluntarily, offered community amenity contributions? If I have a seconder, I will speak to that.
Okay. Second by Councillor Wilson, and just 2 seconds through to Director Coates.
I sent her a copy of it.
She's got a copy? Okay, and wasn't aware of that. So, all right, go ahead, Councillor Proctor.
So I think that
I'm sorry, point of information. Could that be read again? Because I
certainly,
don't have a copy. Thank you.
I'm sorry. And further, that prior to the public hearing being scheduled, that the developer be requested to pay the cost of the district retaining a qualified professional to prepare a financial analysis of the proposed development, including responding to the following questions. Number one, will the development pay for itself? Meaning in terms of the potential tax revenues weighed against the public cost to be incurred in providing local government services to the development. Number two, what benefit is the development to the community, including consideration of the appropriateness of any voluntarily offered community amenity contributions? Do I have a seconder?
Yes, that was seconded by Councillor Wilson.
So the point of my motion is that in my conversations with many Lantzville residents, I have heard people's concerns that the project is going to pay for itself. Some people are concerned that it's going to cost us money to maintain this project. And I think we need an independent financial analysis, because unfortunately, when our staff provides that information, they're questioned by people on council, and that's inappropriate. And I would not ask to put them in that position again. So an independent financial analysis, the cost of which will not cost the district because the developer will pay for it. And that financial analysis will inform us if this project will pay for itself in terms of taxation. And number two, it will inform us so that we can make appropriate decisions for the community, which we've been charged to do when we were voted into office, what the benefit to the community this project is. And we cannot ask developers for community amenities because that could be considered selling zoning. We have to all be reminded that community amenities are volunteered. And I would like to know what the community amenities that this project has volunteered to give Lantzville, if they are of benefit to this community. And perhaps maybe the financial analysis could speak to if it's appropriate for this scope of project. But I don't want to ask any questions that could be reversed and turned on us and somebody accuse us of selling zoning, because that is certainly not our intention. And I think that this documentation that would come forward to us before a public hearing could inform my decision-making greatly. Because although I am a qualified math instructor and I can teach calculus, I'm not a qualified land economist, and I cannot do these sorts of, I'm not trained, nor is anyone else on this council to make these kind of evaluations. And I feel very strongly about that. I know what my limits are. I know what my capabilities are, and I know what kind of information I would like to make informed decisions. And further to that, I don't think that badgering a consultant is going to inform my decisions.
Okay, through to the seconder, Councilor Wilson.
I don't have anything to add, but I think it's an excellent motion. It's something that I've asked the question on before with previous development applications. So I fully support this amendment.
Okay, and through to the rest of the council. Okay, hearing none, I will call the question on, sorry, I guess, is this more of an amendment to the main motion, I'm assuming? Yeah, okay.
Yes, amendment to the main motion.
So I will call the question on an amendment to the main motion. So all those in favor and opposed? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, additional amendments, questions?
I'm sorry, could I ask for a 3-minute break? I need a glass of water.
Okay,
I
take
time.
5. So take a 5-minute recess. It's noting the time. I just actually I'll use my official timer there.
Thank you.
So it's 8:47. So we'll reconvene at 8:52. Thank you. Okay, just waiting for Councillor Wilson Proctor. Okay, great. So I'll call this meeting back to order. Through to council, additional questions, motions. Okay, well, I'll go and then we'll bounce back to maybe Councillor Proctor and then Councillor Savage. I just had a quick question through to you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you for staying on the line. It's probably turning into a longer night for you, but in terms of on page 52 of the special plan area document under project and amenities and under C or cash contribution, it says a direct contribution of 3,000 per residential unit to the district. I'm just trying to reconcile where that number came from or how that amount got arrived. Like, so when I do the basic math, that equates to 520 extra units. Is that above and beyond what's in the OCP document? I'm just trying to figure out the number.
Sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, I probably didn't phrase it very well. Maybe it's because I'm getting tired. Early morning hockey practice this morning, but yeah, so in the OCP, you know, it states the anticipated number of units 254 to 389, and that would be for the whole Village South area. But when I do the math on the cash contribution, that's 120 units. So is that above and beyond the numbers in the OCP document? Like, I'm just trying to understand that where you.
Oh, I see. So are you saying where does the 1.56 come from?
Yeah, just trying to reconcile that.
I would have to go back in time for the exact number, but if you do the math of you know, it's 500 odd units, and I think what I quoted before was what did I say?
700.
And sorry, yes, but in terms of the I have just flipping between resources here. 1 second, it will come to me very soon, I think. So if we do the units per hectare for areas A and B, and we come up with what I said to Councillor Savage earlier of 225 plus
290. Yeah.
290 times 3,000 is 1.55, and I think we added some more units in there with the assumption that there would be some additional units without focusing on a specific area, which is why it's not a specific number.
Okay, so yeah,
it's approximate, so we're assuming that we're going to be in that range or higher if the density is maximized. But that in a situation where the mixed use zoning had a significant amount of residential, then that number would be substantially higher.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So that's a cautious estimate with the potential for it to be substantially higher. Because before you just finished quoting my 700. So obviously if we did 700 times 3,000, we're going to be at $2.1 million.
Okay, so I'm just, again, maybe
it's not above and beyond the OCP number. It is a straight $3,000 per residential door.
And it has nothing to do with above and beyond, because the only reason I'm asking is because in the past, the way we've done it is like if for an area, if the zoning permits, say 4 units, and then we rezone the area to 8 units of housing, then we would get the difference, like, so 4 times 3,000, right? So that's sort of
something more like a density bonus.
Yeah, so
I'm sure my client would be happy to calculate it that way, but that's not what's in the proposal.
So it's basically above and it's based on the residential.
It's based on each residential per residential unit, nothing to do with the OCP number.
Okay. No, thank you. Again, I was kind of wondering how that number came about. So
yeah. So the approximate in brackets, like I said, that's just to give people an idea. I would see that as you know, on the lower end, since before I quoted approximately 700 units would be anticipated. That one there would be more in the neighborhood of low 500 units.
Okay. And then just along the project amenities, because again, this is what the community is going to be looking at. These are the carrots that are being dangled before the community to say, hey, this is maybe makes the idea that much better. But just in the concept of the school field, or sorry, the playing field. So, there's an approximation of $1 million in construction. Just with the playing field, I didn't know if there had been any specific design details about that. And what I'm really driving at here is really looking at an all-weather field, possibly with lights. If we're going to be looking at amenities and we're advocating on behalf of the municipality, not extorting, but just advocating, we'd be looking at trying to get the best option. And I in terms of I know the capital replacement of an artificial turf field is probably much higher than there's doesn't even compare to a turf or grass field, but in terms of just the usability of a field, I think that would be the best thing. So has that been discussed at all or explored in terms of what kind of playing field would go in?
To be perfectly honest, I've been outside of those conversations about the design details. I know something for a playing field construction in the neighborhood of $1 million has been looked at and discussed. I am not aware that it's a all-weather turf field. I'd be hesitant to propose a brand new all-weather turf field in that location without, more exploration, both at the financials and potential environmental impacts. So yeah, I'm making the assumption that it's grass, and I apologize, I don't have more details on that.
That's okay. I'm not trying to lock you into any kind of response either. I was just curious if that was if it had been explored or discussed, because again, that would be, I think, really advantageous sorry, for the community to have, as opposed to just a grass field, as those require a lot of maintenance and time and such. All right, I'll just leave it at that for now. I know there's other members of council have questions, so I believe Councillor Proctor, and then we'll go to Councillor Savage.
I have a question through you, Mayor, to staff. I'm looking at the school road extension, Director Young, and I am concerned about kids right now. The drop off is that's organized and approved and sort of advertised through school newsletters is for parents to drop kids off in the parking lot, use it as a circular fashion, and then exit down school road. If school road extends, and it will cut that parking lot off. So I'm wondering if do you anticipate entering into conversations with the school district? And if it would be possible to entertain some conversations with them about developing a new drop-off pattern that we could entertain before we decide school road should go through or not.
Through the mayor to Councillor Proctor, absolutely. We're required to do consultation with the school district on any OCP amendment. And so we'll have a specific discussion with them about that through road connection. I will say that we don't anticipate it to be a high volume road. It'll be a local road with very little traffic. But totally agree that that is a concern, and we expect to hear from the residents that that's a concern as well. And so we may need to look at alternative locations for a drop off, perhaps within the actual road design and standard. So on the east side of that new through road connection, there could be a drop off bay on that side for parents to park. That's right. Yeah.
I'm sure that you have more ideas, and the school district does, than I have, but I have been involved in those conversations as a school administrator with many schools, and drop-off plans always need to be changed and are looked at actively by the school district. So just to ease parents' minds, that will be looked at. I'm not going to micromanage anybody and offer any suggestions, but I do look forward to hearing the ideas that come up in consultation with the school district. I'm also wondering, another quick question, people are very concerned about Seaview being over capacity. And I know in my experience as a school administrator, the schools have in-depth knowledge about who's living in the community, and they review it on a yearly basis. They know how many children in the age between 0 and 1 there are in the community, how many 1 to 2-year-olds. They anticipate progression through the school, and they plan accordingly. Do they also enter into discussions with the district about construction, Director Young, and anticipate numbers in the school and plan accordingly in those discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. So district staff meet with school district staff on basically a quarterly basis to talk about a variety of different issues. We have a memorandum of understanding with the school district. So we talk about those issues on a regular basis. Future school sites are a reoccurring discussion topic. The school district has identified that they are likely going to need a new elementary school site in Upper Lantzville as a result of some of the development that's occurring in Upper Lantzville, like the Foothills development. In Lower Lantzville, in the Village South area in particular, there is capacity in Seaview Elementary. What they've indicated is that if there is a need, there is capacity on the Seaview Elementary School site for portable structures if needed. Yeah, no, the other comment I would make is that the school district just completed their long-range facilities plan, which I believe they presented to this council as well, which looked at some of those issues. One of the things they looked at was establishing a school site acquisition charge, which would be collected from development to help fund acquisition of new sites for school site facilities.
Thank you. I remember that discussion. And just to add further, when my children were in Seaview, there were over 450 students there, and that included 3 portables. And there was a design drawn up and a plan approved by the school board to increase the capacity of Seaview. And then they realized through the data presented by the government that the population was decreasing, so they didn't do that big expansion of the school. So that property is capable, and there is a plan that's already been drawn up to expand that school if it's needed. I just know that from my experience as the PAC president and a parent of children there at Seaview. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Savage.
Thank you. Question to Mr. Peterson, please. The Watt traffic report references a government office building, which is 90,000 square feet, and another government office building, which is 820 square feet. Both are on the land dedicated to the public for community services. Can you please explain what are these government office buildings?
These are simply conceptual proxies for the highest possible density that we could envision that the district might pursue on those lands if there was to be relocated, for example, district offices or future community center. What happens on those lands is entirely up to the district and has really nothing to do with myself or the planning work that we're doing.
Okay, and within the Watt traffic report, it referred to 88 people living there. Was there a residential component to this, or were they referring to potential office workers?
I have to assume office workers, but I don't have the report. I have to flick through the report and read it again to confirm that, but that's my assumption.
Okay. And it was my understanding there would be land provided on Village South for subsidized seniors housing, which the Legion has expressed interest in sponsoring. Is this included in the proposal or not?
This is included in the overall district lands that are provided. If the district wishes to use that for subsidized housing, then that would be entirely up to the district.
All right, so if it was, then it would be up to the district on the community services property. And in this plan, it shows both Harvey Road and Rossiter Road being connected to the development with a gate or bollards or whatever. separating them for, I would assume, emergency vehicles, but then it also states that a revision of the previous traffic study would be done with the potential of opening up Harvey and Rossiter roads. So is the intention to have them through roads at this point, or?
Certainly not the intention in our application. Is that, I'm assuming that wording is in the Watt report?
I'm sorry, there's so many documents. I've got where I got that. I was reading it, one of the documents, and it referred to, it may have been your concept report, I forget, but it did refer to this simultaneously in the rezoning process. There would also be a revision of the traffic study, and the reference was having more access to roads. So I assume that would mean opening up Harvey and Rossiter. So that was
that's not part of our proposal. The special area plan, page number 21, has the proposed trail greenway connections at those points. As far as we're concerned from a planning and development perspective, that is the plan. If the district wants to pursue a vehicle connection through those roads for one reason or another, then we'd be happy to discuss that with the district and work forward from there.
Okay, and then it said extending the laneway from Lynd Road. That's currently a walkway. Does that extending the laneway, would that accommodate vehicles like service vehicles, or what's meant by laneway there? This is where Lynd Road enters right by the school there. There's a little pavement, asphalt walkway for a short way.
We're talking that would enter into the existing community use site?
Yes.
Yeah, that was just envisioned as a trail connection.
Okay. And the servicing studies states new storm sewers will be constructed along Colette, then Jack Road. But the district's policy is to have on-site drainage, meaning the runoff from this site cannot increase. So I'm just wondering, what is the need for storm sewers going down to the beach if no on-site runoff is anticipated?
The primary reason is that the downstream storm sewer drainage is under capacity and outdated and runs through people's backyards and is, causing flooding and drainage issues. And the site receives upstream drainage from, for example, the highway and other properties that haven't been designed to meet the Lantzville's stormwater requirements. And so there needs to be a way to convey that stormwater downstream in a safe and effective way. And as part of this application, we're paying for those upgrades.
So the idea is to improve the quality of these, not the capacity, and not planning to increase the outflow.
Those details are in the servicing report as well as in, I believe, my report. I believe it will increase the capacity and the quality because it's changing the actual infrastructure from a mixture of open ditches and somewhat, underbuilt infrastructure. So that will be improved. The capacity, I'm guessing I could go back and look at the site servicing report, will be increased in quality and capacity. However, our application is required to meet Lantzville's stormwater drainage bylaw regulations, which, yes, as you noted at the beginning, pre and post stormwater flows need to be equal.
Thank you. And
Can I have a point of order, please? Councillor Savage has had the floor for 6.5 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to interject because I've got some stuff to ask. So unless there's a follow-up, Councillor Savage, in relation to stormwater management, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the council, including myself.
yeah, that's fine. I'd be happy if you want to come back to me then. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And then in terms of speakers after myself, is there any, so Councillor Gustenberg, I see your hands up. You haven't had much to say on this. Did you have questions for Mr. Peterson?
No, I've been listening very attentively. I note that there's been quite a bit of discussion, and I'm hoping that we can get to the question here in very short order. And so I understand you have something to say, and I'm going to be asking that the question be called on this motion following your comments.
All right. Yeah, there's lots of questions to ask, and again, is the will of council how we proceed ahead. But we'll go for it. I guess start my time, I suppose. So, yeah. So on page 54 of the Village Cell Special Plan, Mr. Peterson, they're under the OCP consistency, and I'm not going to go through every single one, but the one I will point out is, I guess it's 11.1.2, number 10. And the policy from the OCP is basically a limited number of high quality apartments with underground parking nestled into tree buffers. So initially when, we adopted the OCP, the idea was to, I believe it'd be the south side of the development, kind of going up against the highway would be, if there were going to be apartments, that's where they'd be nestled. And wouldn't be necessarily part of the area. But in a response, it says a limited number of high quality apartments will be provided in areas that minimize the impact on adjacent residents. The part I'm having a difficult time reconciling is how that limited number matches up to what's in the concept plan. Because in the concept plan, I think it has, I don't know, like around maybe 17 apartment buildings, and give or take. So to me, that doesn't seem like a limited number. And even thinking like in the terms of the number of units, it seems like it's, more dominating a certain area of the overall concept plan. So I'm just wondering how you guys went from a limited number to 17 apartment buildings, give or take, right? Maybe you can even reconcile that for me, given the fact that, it is a concept design plan. I don't know if there's any comments or you can offer.
No, I'm assuming you're getting the 17 from just counting the larger buildings. It's definitely worth keeping in mind that over half of, I think, your 17, I have to calculate, maybe not, maybe it's roughly half, are in mixed use areas. So those could very easily be commercial or mixed use format buildings. And those are consistent with, the directions for the village in the OCP. The swath of area B that runs from Ware Road south is where we're seeing the multifamily buildings, or the most likely scenario for the multifamily buildings. And those permit townhouses and apartment buildings, and you see a mix there. The concept plan shows what it shows out of, it is conceptual. The market's going to drive the mix there as well as the FARs. So, limited, I guess, is a subjective. If it's going to be, 8 multifamily buildings on a site that is this large, that seems fairly limited. But if you're counting mixed use buildings as well, then your count is going to go up.
Yeah, appreciate that. Okay, I'll just leave it at that on that item. With respect to, and again, it's kind of tough to look at this because, at the end of the day, the OCP amendment document is really a conceptual document. It doesn't really, it's really the zoning document that means the most, because that's what, ultimately the subdivision has to adhere to is the zoning bylaw. So the one thing I'm trying, and I not to bring up Clark Med, but in the Clark Med zoning bylaw, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct here, like with the different areas, it did state, the number of units. So now we, now we've established for areas A and B, in terms of the number of units, like 225 and 290, why wouldn't that be included in the zoning amendment bylaw? Rather than having it as the 100 units per hectare, why not have it as up to a maximum of 225 for area A and up to a maximum of 290 for area B? Just to give that certainty, because again, residents are looking for certainty.
Well, the
Those are
primary
quick
reason we
ways.
went with what we did for the Village South is that, if you look elsewhere at other successful towns and villages, even working with units per hectare is sort of an outdated way to go. FAR is the best practice. And the reason for that is, as you just noted, what are the things that are going to determine the form and character of the development through the zoning bylaw regulations. And what we really want to do is look at the maximum potential box that might be built, and then have a host of sort of quality control mechanisms through the development permit process and through the design guidelines of the special area plan that will ensure that the design quality, as I tried to emphasize earlier, will be at its maximum. Once you get into units per hectare and unit counts, then you hamstring yourself in a situation, for example, if BC Housing did come forward and you're looking to do a subsidized housing project, or perhaps a community care project or seniors housing project, where you might have smaller units, and then you're in a situation where you have to then go through another process in order to approve that rather than accommodating it. Moreover, trapping yourself in by units doesn't necessarily represent what the demand is going to be on servicing or traffic, for example, because it's all about where those units are located, what type of units they are, who's living in those units, and so forth and so on. So best practice would suggest that FAR be appropriate in a village setting like this.
Okay. Appreciate it.
A point of information. You've had the
Yeah.
floor for 6.5 minutes, Mayor Swain.
Okay. So in terms of Councillor Gusselbrecht has called the question. That's where is that correct, Councillor Gusselbrecht?
Yes,
So
I have a point.
I'm definitely not done asking questions and trying to get information, but before voting on second reading. But what I will do is, since the question has been called, I will ask council to vote whether or not to call the question, and if it is affirmative.
There's a point of order, please.
Sorry, what's your point of order, Councillor Savage?
Yes, I have at least one amendment to make. And if other councillors are given opportunity to make amendments, then it's a completely improper process that I wouldn't be allowed to. And this is a huge community changing proposal. And I'm absolutely stunned that I keep getting cut off just to get information. We need this information to make an informed decision. Residents need this information. It's a prime opportunity. We have the proponent here to answer these questions. I still have a number of questions to be answered. There's no rush.
Okay, Councillor Savage, your point of
my point is, I'd like to be able to make an amendment.
Yes. So yeah, it's kind of a tough spot to be in, isn't it? So ultimately, even with respect to my speaking time, some of that was taken up by Mr. Peterson. I don't know how much time I spoke, but again, we're asking questions, council. This is again about the most important development that will occur in Lantzville. It will for sure forever shape Lantzville. So I think we ought to, lend more time and questions to this process, but again, if it's the will of council to vote on this right now and have it as second reading, past second reading, then that is the will of council. So Councillor Savage, your point of order noted with respect to making amendments, but Councillor Gusselbrecht did have his request to call the question. So at this point, what I will be doing is moving forward with his request. So what we're doing now, council, is we're going to vote on whether or not to call the question. If we vote in affirmative, then I will call the question on first and second reading. And that is my decision on this.
Okay, well, I have a point of order, please.
Okay, what is your point of order, Councillor Savage?
All right, my point of order before was to be allowed to, as other councillors were allowed to make amendments. And now my point of order is that this now shows the process to be a rush process that Councillor Kesselbrack is
Okay,
obviously.
Councillor Savage, I'll stop you there. Let's not make this about personalities. Let's just stay on the track here of
Well, let me phrase
what's
it this
before
way.
us, and ultimately it's the will of council. The will of council is to move this forward, then that's what it is.
All right, well, let me make my point, please, on process. The Clark Med development proposal is under judicial review due to concerns about process. Surely we should be as careful as possible to make sure we get this process correctly. So there I've cited two things which I feel improper in this process, that a councillor is, number one, not allowed to make any amendments where another councillor was. Second, that we're prevented from getting more information on this, which is missing. This is not idle information. This is very important.
So Councillor Savage, sorry to interrupt you, but your point of order has been noted, and both your reasons also noted. Councillor Kesselbrack has called to have the question. So I will move forward with that. And
then as a point of information, please, not to be argumentative, but this is a sincere question.
go ahead. What's your point of information, Councillor Savage?
May I ask when then I'm allowed to speak on whether I'm for or against this, and to give the reasons? I have not yet been given an opportunity to do this, nor has any other council. This was strictly for me, just asking questions and gleaning information. I've yet to have a chance to speak to the motion. So if we do call the question, I'm hoping I'm given an opportunity to speak to it, to whether it's going to be yes or no for me and why.
Yeah, I understand that, but again, it's the will of council, and that's what we will follow here this evening.
Okay.
The question's being, sorry, don't interrupt me, Councillor Kesselbrack. I do have the floor. So the question has been called, so I'm going to council now. I will call the question on whether or not we're going to call the question. So all those in favor? Okay, and opposed, so noting Mayor Swain's opposed. Councillor Savage is opposed. That's carried. So now I will call the question on first and second reading. All those in favor? Opposed, noting that Mayor Swain's opposed, Councillor Savage is opposed, it's carried. So first and second reading is carried. Okay, moving on in our agenda. Where are we?
Does council wish to consider a motion to extend?
Oh,
Or
it's
unanimous
926. Well, I'll put it to the body. So through to council by unanimous consent, or does council wish to extend this evening's meeting? Is there any objections? Okay, Councillor Savage objects. So we will conclude our meeting at 9:30 this evening. So where are we here? I guess we're on to 9. Why am I mixed? Oh, I'm missing a page. Sorry. Ah, there it is. Okay. So we're on to bylaw number 284. So we have the staff report. Someone, again, who can get this on the floor if you wish. So Councillor Proctor, if you're prepared to make the motion, go ahead.
That the District of Lantzville zoning bylaw number 180, 2020 amendment in parentheses Village South Special Area Plan Zone in parentheses bylaw number 284, 2021 be given first and second reading.
Okay, do we have a seconder to that? So second by Councillor Kesselbrack. Well, it is 9:27, almost 8. Through to council. Councillor Proctor, you made the motion. If you wish to speak to it for a minute or two.
I think that this is important to bring forward to first and second reading. And I think that what we all need to realize is that we have months between first and second reading and a public hearing to have questions answered. The part of this process is going to be a developer open house and information sessions. And we will have lots of time to have all of our questions answered before we consider the final public opinion on either one of these. And I think that we all need to take a deep breath and acknowledge that. I don't know that we're going to get much past this. My thoughts on that tonight, since we're ending the meeting at 9:30 upon Councillor Savage's request.
Okay, Councillor Gesselbrecht.
Yes, no, I echo what Councillor Proctor has said. This is simply the beginning of this process as set out in the OCP. There's going to be not only a public information hearing sponsored by the developer. The developer has a website. Many questions can be gleaned off of that website. Following a public information meeting, there will be a public hearing. But as Councillor Proctor stated, there's lots of time in between. I'm sure we'll have a robust response from the public, but I really enjoin the public to look at the websites, look at these materials here tonight, listen to the video. There's a lot of good questions asked and answers given. This is the beginning of the process. And we're doing it according to the way it's set out in the OCP. So
I have to cut you off, Councillor Gesselbrecht. We do have to adjourn our meeting, but just before we do that, through to Mr. Peterson, thank you for attending this evening and answering our questions. I know it's not easy, but again, I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll probably speak again. Do need a motion to adjourn the meeting. I'll make the motion. Do I have a seconder? So second by Councillor Savage. I will call the question. All those in favor, opposed, it's carried. Okay. Good evening.